Legal use of force. Hi, I'm an armed security guard, and as such, I'm registered to work in security guard capacity, certified to carry a concealed firearm, and trained annually in the use of force. Most people have lots of questions when considering when using force is justified. When can they legally use force to defend themselves or others? And how are law enforcement and security personnel trained in the use of force? My speech today is to briefly inform you about a standard doctrine called the use of force continuum. What is the use of force continuum? The use of force continuum is a structured and organized scale of force that provides guidelines used to determine what level of force is necessary to apply in any given situation. It can be used by law enforcement, security personnel, and even civilians. Information in the force continuum describes an escalating series of actions that can help you determine an appropriate but justified response to levels of force used against you. That response must always be proportionate to the seriousness of the offense. The lowest level of the use of force continuum, level 1, involves using no physical force at all. It's called presence. Have you ever noticed how traffic slows down to the speed limit when a clearly marked patrol car is sitting in the middle of the highway or by the side of the road? This is the power of presence. This is always the preferred method of resolving a situation or conflict, as no force is used. The mere presence of a highly visible, uniformed security officer or a marked vehicle is often enough to make any incident settle down fairly quickly or diffuse a situation. Knowing that a police officer or a security guard is watching is an effective method to stop a crime in progress or prevent a situation from escalating. Simply by standing, walking, running, or using a vehicle, a security officer posted around a facility provides a calming influence. Without saying a word, an alert officer can deter a crime or direct criminals away from property by use of body language and gestures. At this level, a security officer's attitude should be non-threatening and professional. If physical force is not enough, verbal commands can be added in combination to presence. This is called verbalization, level 2 of the force continuum. Verbalization includes both verbal commands and verbal requests. A verbal command can be simple guidance, such as, please use this door, watch your step, don't move. Words have a range of forcefulness. They can be whispered, used normally, or shouted to be more effective. Intensity can be increased as necessary in serious situations, but it's always best to start out calm. Answering visitors' questions can be an extension of presence, letting those watching know that you are there, alert, and involved. They can also include verbal de-escalation, which involves diffusing a situation before it escalates into a disruption or even violence. The goal of de-escalation is to identify stressors and redirect aggression to a calmer personal space by offering alternatives to that aggression. This is attained through maintaining control of both self and the situation, reduction of anxiety, and avoiding violent actions through calm, patient communications. Words have a range of forcefulness. They can be whispered, used normally, or shouted to be effective. When using verbal commands, the content of the message is just as important as your demeanor and tone and voice. It should be non-threatening, calm, but firm. The right combination of words, in combination with an officer's presence, can de-escalate a tense situation and prevent the need for physical altercation. Certain situations may arise where presence and words alone are not enough to reduce aggression. Whether it's for self-defense or if your position requires it, sometimes security officers will need to get involved physically. This is level 3 of the use of force continuum. An agitated suspect who gives the impression that they may lash out at security staff or other individuals requires escalation. This type of suspect is a passive resistor. Passive resistors won't respond to verbal commands, but they give in when an officer initiates physical contact. If a security officer decides it's time to use physical force, They must remember only to use the force necessary in the amount needed to gain control, no more, no less. Level 3 of the force continuum involves hand control techniques, holds, and restraints. This is basically the use of bare hands minus the aid of equipment or weapons to hold or restrain. There are two types of empty hand control techniques: open or soft empty hand control techniques, and closed and hard empty hand control techniques. First, we have open or soft hand control techniques. At this level, minimum force would involve the use of bare hands to guide, hold, or restrain. This involves locking and holding techniques, takedowns, avoidance, blocking techniques. This is achieved by applying holds. Holds limit the subject's movement, allowing security personnel to restrain a threatening suspect by controlling their arms and legs and hands and maintaining control until help arrives. When using control holds, it's vital not to get too aggressive. This ensures the avoidance of injuries to both you and the suspect. Use enough weight and strength with the goal of restricting their ability to move, but not so much as to cause injury. Never use chokeholds. Chokeholds distress individuals differently. It's hard to judge how the pressure of a chokehold can restrict the breathing or circulation of an individual. Secondly, we have closed or hard hand empty control techniques. Hard or closed hands means using physical pressure and strength, force by means of joint manipulation, pain compliance, takedowns, or pressure point control. This may involve punching or striking body parts, takedowns, and subduing an attacker with impact techniques, skills and tactics that cause pain and leave marks without causing injury. These techniques have the capability to cause injury. Only after ordinary holds have failed to control an aggressive and dangerous suspect are you granted legal justification to use these offensive moves in self-defense from bodily injury. Suspects who ignore verbal warnings and are moving beyond verbal aggression towards violence and are threatening imminent physical attack require more extreme but non-deadly use of force. These suspects are called active resistors. They actively resist attempts to physically control them, but they don't go out of their way to inflict harm to the officer or others involved during the struggle. This is level 4 of the use of force continuum, less than lethal force. This type of altercation necessitates more physical assertiveness, equipment to disable or restrain, and self-defense for a manner that doesn't cause permanent damage and brings the aggressor under control. Less than lethal force techniques can gain control of a situation with intermediate or blunt impact weapons. These weapons are designed to impact muscles, arms, legs with an amount of force that would have a high probability of causing connective tissue damage or bone fractures. Intentionally using intermediate weapons on head, neck, groin, kneecaps, or spine would be classified as deadly lethal force. Less than lethal weapons are valuable when less than lethal force is appropriate. When lethal force is justified, but it could cause injury to bystanders or collateral damage to the environment. Or when lethal force may subdue an aggressor, but lethal force is available as a backup. Before using non-lethal methods, less physical measures such as verbalization and control techniques have to have been tried and were deemed inappropriate or ineffective. Deadly force is the highest level of the use of force continuum, and it must be justified. This is level 5. It should only be used if a suspect poses a serious, significant threat to the officer or another individual involved. When you are in imminent danger or fear of death or great bodily injury is the only time deadly force is justified. Words alone are not a basis for people to reasonably believe that they face an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, and they cannot be used to justify deadly force against the speaker. You are authorized to use deadly force in most states as long as you are aware of the state's laws regarding the use of deadly force, so do your research. Lots of states have different laws. A lethal weapon is an object used as a weapon with the likelihood of causing death or grave bodily injury. The most common known lethal weapon is firearms, but they can also be applied by your hands, edged weapons like knives, machetes, swords, impact tools such as clubs or baseball bats. Now, there are situations such as an active shooter incident in which lethal force, preferably by a firearm, is the best option. Officers use deadly lethal weapons to stop an individual's actions or gain control of a situation. Firearms require training and practice to be used safely and effectively. They should never be pulled or branded as a deterrent or used as a control tool. This is the force continuum will be considered in the aftermath as a test to see if other alternatives to deadly force were used first, available, or more appropriate. You may be justified in shooting a suspect in self-defense that is standing in front of you, but not justified in wounding innocent bystanders 2 blocks away because of the range of the bullet you shot. You may be justified in shooting a suspect charging at you with a knife, but not justified after he turns to run away. It can be argued that the use of force doctrine created in the 1970s is out of date and ineffective by today's standards. But for those in professions where the use of force is sometimes necessary, the use of force continuum is a great training tool and set of guidelines that can help keep a situation from escalating and to clarify to law enforcement, courts, and the general public that the proper justifiable use of force was followed. The use of force continuum generally has many levels. Level 3 can be broken down into 2 separate levels. So depending on which continuum you are trained in, it can be 5 or 6 levels. As you become more familiar with the continuum, you may move from one part of the continuum to another in a matter of seconds. In conclusion, this is just a brief explanation of the use of force continuum. It is always recommended to receive formal training by a certified instructor or to do your own research. Thanks for listening.